Welcome back to the podcast. My name is Aaron Sokol, and you're watching Parsha Inspired. Isaiah 49:6 asks the Jewish people to return to the land and be a light to the nations.
What sort of religious upbringing did your father give you?
Oh, we were Swiss Reformed.
And did he make you attend church regularly?
Oh, well, that was quite natural.
Yes.
Everybody went to church on
Yes.
Sunday.
And did you believe in God?
Oh, yes.
Do you now believe in God?
Now, difficult to answer. I know. I don't need to believe. I know.
Dr. Carl Jung, in his book Modern Man in Search of the Soul, writes that in the past 30 years, many men from all corners of the globe have come to seek my advice. I have treated sick people by the hundreds, many of them in the second half of their lives. There was not one whose problem was not due to a depressing religious outlook on life. It is possible to state with certainty that each one of them had sickened due to the giving up on that which religion provides to the believer, and they were only cured if they returned to recognizing religion. Welcome back to the podcast. My name is Aaron Sokol, and you're watching Parsha Inspired. Isaiah 49:6 asks the Jewish people to return to the land and be a light to the nations. The question, why do we need the Jews to return in order to be a light to the nations? Why can't they simply be in exile and spread the light of Torah? So let's dive in. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Now, if the Torah is a book of instructions for the Jewish people, the commentators ask, then why did it not begin with a commandment for the Jewish people to fulfill? Now, their answer demonstrates the universality of the Torah in that the question itself is misleading. The Torah is not intended solely for the Jewish people, but for all mankind. The Torah, therefore, in its opening sentence, intends to address not one section of humanity, but all thinking creature. The Creator is saying to mankind, know that I have brought all of existence into being and that I am to be worshipped. This opening sentence calls to all mankind to recognize the Creator. The Torah is neither a book of history nor of science, nor even of philosophy, though it contains elements of each. It is a guide to life, a vital presentation for conduct in any situation which intends to give meaning to a person's journey through this world. The word Torah means teaching. The English word Bible means book, and even though it may be the book par excellence, it would still denote merely a book without further connotations. The word Torah, however, indicates its function, the teaching of duties to mankind. Since all mankind is included in the scope of the Torah, how do we derive the respective roles of the Jew and the non-Jew? What is the purpose of this distinction? Mankind was presented with moral obligations from the moment of its creation. Man was bidden by God to keep 7 laws which formed the basis for a well-functioning society. These 7 laws were given to Noah, this being the permanent share of truth, containing both spiritual and material benefits appropriate to them. These laws, if kept in the proper manner, bring to those who keep them the reward associated with true fulfillment of the divine will. They apply equally to all nations without any prejudice or distinction, and thus they set out a new and harmonious basis for the running of society. Relationships between man and God, between man, and between man and his fellow creatures are all included in their scope, strengthening moral qualities and imbuing existence with purpose and beauty. The complex world of today is an anxious search for consensus, for guiding principles which can gain the goodwill of everyone. And this will bring us to a time as described in Zephaniah. Let's have a look. For then I will turn to the nations in a clear language, that they may all call upon the name of the Lord to serve him with one voice. Zephaniah 3:9. And all flesh will call upon your name. All who now dwell in confusion will recognize and know you, for to you every knee will bow, and every tongue will swear, and all will take upon themselves the yoke of your kingdom. This we say in prayer. Now, in recent years, a wide cross-section of the world's population has experienced a religious revival. This has occurred after strenuous attempts to distance themselves from belief in God during an era when technology appeared to reign supreme. Now, in the 19th century, following the Industrial Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars, science broke down barriers in the understanding of the workings of nature. Thus, in the rush of novelties, there came to mind the feeling that all the questions of life had been answered. A new religion of science arose to displace belief in God. In our own century, the rise of communism, we all remember, set in motion a chain of events which have all but been removed, but their goal was to remove faith from centuries where it had been strong. The commercialization of the West has introduced a materialistic scale of values to areas of life where they were never known before. However, the realization is spreading that scientific and political systems also cannot provide the answers to fundamental questions, and that this shortcomings creates unease and dissatisfaction. Thus, humanity is coming once again towards a recognition of the Creator. The general public themselves are searching for a path which will have genuine meaning for their lives, and through which they can realize their spiritual dimension in addition to their more obvious physical one. Now, therefore, there are some who have attached themselves to formal religions, and also many who are still searching, but all share the common goal of spiritual fulfillment. It is clear that if a way could be shown to them by which their need for basic beliefs and duties could be satisfied, they would realize its worth immediately. The commandments incumbent on all mankind have this capability, and if they were to be explained, then people would take upon themselves to observe them. This instruction to the Jews takes on responsibility for spreading the truth of the 7 Noahide laws. In the words of the Midrash, that the Jews are held accountable if they do not inform the world of the divinity of the Lord. Now, furthermore, Maimonides in his Book of Commandments quotes the Sifri, this Midrash, to Deuteronomy 3:23. We have already explained that this commandment of loving God involves calling upon all mankind to worship him and to believe in him. This is one of the positive commandments. It's actually positive commandment number 3, which is incumbent on every Jew. If all this is so clearly stated, then we may ask, why is it that so few people are engaged in these duties, even aware of them? In fact, there have always been a small number of people who involve themselves in these concepts. One, in particular, who lived in the 19th century, took it upon himself to do so and made it his life's work. He was Rabbi Yoel Schwartz. Now, he was born in Italy, and he was the author of Israel and Humanity, in which he explains the problem. And he does it like this. Since Judaism, in exile, expected the realization of her purpose only in the distant future, it rested upon her to warn those who kept her laws of the dangers that might await for them on the long and hard journey, in order to strengthen their resolve to fulfill their task when the proper time arose. To this end, the idea was formed that it was best for Judaism to distance herself from all that was likely to turn her people away from the desired goal. Now, therefore, in our times, there exists a much greater degree of religious tolerance than ever before. Each man is allowed to cherish and develop his own ideas. Therefore, now it is upon us to address ourselves to this task in a straightforward manner under the guidance of our great spiritual leaders, whose perception is such as to avert any danger of untold influences. The result that might flow from this effort can be anticipated from the many statements of non-Jewish philosophers of the influence of Judaic thought in general, as for instance the French philosopher Reniel, where he writes, "One cannot deny that the Jews have many hidden talents, more than all the nations of the world. They are born dispersed across many lands, yet they are men excelling in literature, philosophy, and research." Humanity received from the ancient world three teachers: the Jews, teachers of faith, character, and ethics; the Greeks, teachers of wisdom; the Romans, teachers of law. From the Greeks and Romans we have learnt all there is to learn, and having completed their tasks, they vanished, but the Jews have remained. And this is a sign that we need their law and that we have much to learn from them. That's his words. Now, one of the greatest religious mysteries that has confronted mostly the non-Jewish world is the influence of Judaism on other descendants of Abraham, his son Ishmael and his grandson Esau. Both of these carried on campaigns directed in a certain way against idol worship through their religion of Islam and Christianity. However, they distorted Judaism's teachings in a fashion which negates the Torah, though deriving from a source of truth. In particular, they did not take upon themselves the commandments of the Torah, even in the Noahide sense in which they existed at that time. Rabbi Ben Amazog wrote in his book, The Jew, Who Is He? What Is He? In a response to a non-Jew who inquired the correct way, showing the necessary preconditions. And he wrote, "In order to recognize the truth, in order to find favor in the eyes of God, you have no need to convert to Judaism as you think, to take upon yourself the many commandments of the Torah. In our hands has been placed a religion which is for all mankind, a special religion that non-Jews should accept for themselves, through which they may gain the world to come and find favor in God's eyes, as did our own forefathers before the giving of the Torah." Now, how is one able to understand that the true religion which God gave to all mankind began just from the time of Moses and is stamped with the mark of specific people? That seems like a contradiction. No, you should know that God's plan is a wider nature, and that the religion of humanity is none other than that of the sons of Noah. The explanation of this phrase is not that Noah himself was the proponent of these laws, but that they were called by his name because during his lifetime the covenant between God and man concerning the commandments was made. This is the religion that Israel has guarded over in order to pass it on to the nations of the world. This is the path that you should follow. Efforts should be made to spread its knowledge, as is demanded of me, without coming to desire the Torah of Moses, which is the private duty of the Jewish people. Now, the religions of Christianity and Islam, for they in the main are based on the denial of the Torah of Moses, even though one may also find good ideas and beliefs in them. they still deny the Torah. Thus, even though Christianity and Islam have spread belief in God, agreed in a distorted manner, this stems, according to Rabbi Ben Amazog, from the Jewish obligations to spread such belief. Without this basis in Judaism, these religions would not have been successful as they have been in reducing the worship of false gods. As, if this were so, why were those who were influenced by Judaism themselves the greatest persecutors and inflictors of suffering on the Jews? Great harm was caused by idolaters, but not as great as that by Christians and Muslims. The thought arises that perhaps the suffering that was wrought by them bears some relation to precisely this duty of the Jews to spread belief in God among the nations, that if we had carried it forward to the extent of making resident Gentiles observers of the 7 laws out of the Romans and the Arabs, then these other religions would never have arisen to cause so much confusion and pain. It is well known that in the early stages of Christianity, there was strong Jewish influence on Roman society, to the extent that many eyes were opened to the emptiness of idol worship. The same is true for the Arabs. In the days of Muhammad, many searched after the true faith, but were prevented by early Christians and Muslims who distorted the truth to form their own structures. Now, another example to this occurred in the spiritual vacuum which followed on the collapse of the false gods of Japan at the close of World War II. Many searching people in that era were caught by Christian missionaries. It is not too much to suppose that if appropriate actions had been taken, they would have become a Ger Toshav, resident Gentiles, a Noahide. Rabbi Ben Amazog tells the story of a group of people in southern France who built a settlement on the basis of the 7 Noahide laws, Israel and humanity. They call themselves children of Noah. This furnishes proof that an effort to spread these truths in the world can meet with success, and at time when such of humanity has lost the path, we owe it to them to make the attempt. Now, what we're going to be doing is try to show the basic ideas which the Gentile needs to know, and to clarify the practical laws in order to ease his task in finding the true fulfilling way. It has also strengthened those who are already involved in keeping the commandments addressed to the non-Jews. We also wish, in this video, to explain our own Jewish people the true Torah attitudes to the nations of the world and their role in the divine scheme. Our great leaders today have perceived that these times are close to the coming of Messiah. Therefore, there was now a greater duty than in the past to be involved in the spreading of the light of Torah, so that in the end of days, all people will return and recognize the truth. The commentator, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchak, Rashi, explains on the verse, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God. The Lord is one. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4. That today the Lord is our God, and not the God of the idol worshippers. But in the future, he will be one God, namely, that all will recognize him as the one and true God. As it is said, on that day, he will be one, and his name will be one. Zechariah 14:9. Well, that completes the introduction. Now let's get into chapter 1. What does it mean that the Jews are a light to the nation? One particular task of the Jewish people is to serve as a light unto the nations, as it says in Isaiah 42:6. Upon the Jewish people rests the responsibility to guard the Torah in the midst of humanity, as a priesthood among God's people, to guard it as a holy nation, to remain in a holy state without becoming involved in the falsehoods of other religions and other nations, guarding with their lives the holiness of man. Now, the Torah and the fulfillment of this divine will are the real basic elements in the life of man, the very ground he walks on. It does not depend on changing values. The Jewish people are pledged to stand firm as its messengers, informing all the nations, both by word and by action, that it is God who rules the world, and God who is good and does good for all creations. That if we would simply do his will, then we would receive in abundance all those things which people consider our blessings, and that our undertaking to serve God would give us a basis upon which we could build our lives. What we just read was written by Rav Samson Raphael Hirsch in his 19 letters in Germany in the last century. His words find illustration in the earliest events in the history of the Jews. The efforts of Abraham to influence the people of his generation, to recognize God in his education of his son Isaac, to follow this path, the first child to be brought up, to do so in the world of idolatry. In turn, Isaac taught Jacob to instill into the nations the concept of a true God, as Maimonides explains in the laws of idolatry. So there's a pattern here. Now, how did this all begin? When Abraham was 40 years old, he recognizes his Creator. With this knowledge, he began to answer the people of his city, or Kasdim, and to discuss these things at length with them, to inform them that they were following the wrong path. He physically broke idols and maintained to the people that it is proper only to worship the God of the world, to bow down and offer sacrifices to him alone, so that all mankind should recognize him. He found it proper to destroy idols in order to prove that man should not mistakenly believe in them as other gods. Now, his success caused King Nimrod to desire to kill him. But a great miracle was wrought, and Abraham survived but was forced to go to Haran, where again he called out loud to the world to inform them that there is but one God, and it's fitting to worship him alone. Thus he continued from city to city, kingdom to kingdom, until he reached the land of Canaan, where again he called out his message, as it's written, and he called by the name of the Lord, the God of the universe. Genesis 21:34. When people gathered around him and asked him for explanations, he would explain to them, each according to his own intellectual capabilities, until he would turn to the true path. At one point in time, he had tens of thousands of followers, the men of Abraham's household, in whose hearts he had planted the lesson. He wrote books and passed on his knowledge to his son Isaac. Isaac then taught it to his own followings and passed it on his knowledge to Jacob, telling him to teach as he did, thereby strengthening the belief of those who were with him. Now, the Sifri in Deuteronomy 45 states that there is a duty today to spread this belief as Abraham did. And Maimonides explains the word of the Sifri as including this duty in the commandment to love God. If you love God, then you would spread the word. As it is said, Abraham, the one who loves me. The idea being, in a deeper sense, that he called upon others to believe in God because of his own great love for him. So too, you should love him to the extent that you will call upon others to come to him. The example one sets for others is just as important as direct instructions, whether in times of freedom or persecution, as Rabbi Hirsch explains in the 19 letters, letter 9. If, however, in the midst of a world which worships wealth and lust, Israel were to live a tranquil life of righteousness and love it, while everywhere else in the generation of man is rapidly sinking into the depths of sensuality and immorality, Israel's sons and daughters should bloom forth in the splendor of youth, purity, and innocence. What a powerful instrument for the good could Israel be. This would affect mankind more quietly and much more forcefully and profoundly than even our tragic record of suffering, which proclaims this intervention of providence in human affairs. Now, this task of teaching grows in importance with the approach of the end of days, as is shown by these words of Isaiah. In Isaiah 2, verses 2 and 3, "And many people should go and say, 'Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his path. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem.'" There are those who express surprise that much interest is taken in attempts to improve the situation of the non-Jewish world in this manner, which so many of our own people are very far from keeping, the Torah and its commandments. They argue that time would be better spent in trying to bring the Jews themselves back to the truth than in winning over the nations of the world. This question has two main answers. One is, as we have already seen from the worlds of the Sifri, as explained by Maimonides, that such activity is a definite obligation from which obligation to our fellow Jews does not exempt us. If there is an opportunity to fulfill only one obligation, then the poor of one's own community takes priority. Also, there are those qualities that are much more appropriate for dialogue with their own brethren may devote themselves to that alone. But the other argument is that, as is well known, one of the strongest factors in inducing Jews to move away from their own heritage is a desire to be like the nations of the world, the desire for assimilation. The impossibility of such a course is indicated by an utterance of the prophet Ezekiel concerning the period of dispersion, the exile. "And that which comes into your mind shall never come about, that you say, 'We will be like the nations, like the families of the lands, to serve wood and stone.'" Now, historically, this is apparent from the events of the Enlightenment period in Europe, when spiritual destruction overtook the Jews from within and without because of the overpowering desire to merge with the nations. The Reformed secular nationalist movement also came into being through the desire, the former said, "Be a man in public and a Jew at home," and the latter, "The nations of the world are called men, but the Jew is not called man." Now, these movements considered that true knowledge was only to be found among the philosophers of the non-Jewish world, and therefore turned away from religion completely. The spread of the nationalist movement, its founders had a greater influence than those of the Enlightenment movement itself, since the latter, by causing a decline in Jewish strength, aroused the desire for normal conditions. The nationalist movement strove to create this through a healthy mind and body. In the sense propounded by the Enlightenment, they tried to create a generation that would not see itself as living under diaspora constraints. Unfortunately, this resulted in an even greater assimilation, since the new Hebrew culture rapidly became more English or American than Jewish. With this in mind, it is clear that if we achieve recognition of our religious truth by the non-Jewish world, then Jewry will come to recognize the worth of its own philosophy and act accordingly. So let's talk about the Torah to the nations. In Exodus, it says, "Before the giving of the Torah, and they encamped in the desert." The Torah was given in an ownerless place in the desert, for it had been given in the land of Israel, the nations of the world would say they had no part in it. Therefore, it was given in the desert, and anyone who wishes to receive it should come and receive it. Midrash Mechilta, chapter 20. This passage requires deep study in the view of the care taken by the rabbis of the past to keep the Torah away from non-Jews, and the many examples in the Torah which support this caution. In fact, it says, a non-Jew who studies the Torah is deserving of death at the hands of heaven. As it is said, the Torah which God commanded us as an inheritance to us and not to them. Tractate Sanhedrin 59a. His statutes and his laws to Israel, he declared, he did not do so to any other nation, and they do not know the laws. Praise the Lord. That's in Psalms 147. So, what's going on? The Zohar, source of the wisdom of Kabbalah, the mysticism, points out at length the great transgression that is committed by passing on the Torah to non-Jews. Any man who does not hold himself back from handing over even the smallest letter of the Torah is as if he destroyed the world and told falsehood in the name of the Holy One, blessed be he. For everything depends on it. As it is said, if I had not established my covenant day and night, the laws of heaven and earth I would not have set. Jeremiah 33:25. And also, this is the Torah that Moses placed before the children of Israel, Deuteronomy 4:44, not before the other nations. Here the Zohar expresses the idea in terms of an unacceptability in teaching those who are uncircumcised, for all the words of the Torah are God's names, and to teach them would bring destruction to the world. We see the extent to which neither the written nor the oral Torah should be taught, even the Ten Commandments. As it is said, to Israel they were given, not to the nations. So, how do we resolve this contradiction? We have seen that there seems to stand a direct contradiction to the previous view we said, though the other statements confirm this. Now, each word that came forth from the mouth of God was split into 70 languages. Rabbi Yochanan said, the voice split into 70 voices for the 70 basic languages in order that each nation should hear the voice in its own language. Midrash Rabbah to Exodus 85:19. Now, Moses explained the Torah in Deuteronomy 1:5, which the early commentators explained to mean that it gave its explanation in these 70 languages, and since the Jewish people had no use for the 70 languages, he must have intended each one for its individual nation. Now, how did Israel write the Torah? On entering the land of Israel, the Jewish people were commanded to write the Torah on a monument on Mount Gerizim. Reb Judah said they wrote it on stone, as it is said, and they wrote all the words of the Torah on stones, and afterwards they plastered it over. Deuteronomy 23:7. Now, Rabbi Shimon argued, and he said to him, according to you, how then did the nations of that time learn Torah, as it had been covered with plaster? Reb Judah replied, God gave them understanding, and they sent their scribes who peeled off the plaster from the stones and carried it away. From then on, their fate was sealed, because they could have learned, but did not. Hence, we learn that in order to return the nations to the true path, one must teach them Torah. The rabbis in Sanhedrin 59a address the contradiction, where it says, a non-Jew who learns Torah is deserving of death. Whereas Rabbi Meir said, where does one learn that? even a non-Jew who learns Torah is compared to the high priest, as it is said, which a man should do and live by them. Neither priest, Levite, nor Israelite is mentioned here, but only man, meaning even a non-Jew. The response of the Gemara is that the non-Jew who earns praise in the one who learns that portion of the Torah which applies to him. The 7 Noahide laws, the Meiri explains, if he would learn the Torah without intending to keep its basic laws, but only out of a desire to learn about our Torah, then he is liable to punishment, for people will see his knowledge and believe him to be a Jew, and thus be led astray. However, if he learns the 7 commandments, with their details and all that may be gleaned from them, even though the main body of the Torah is contained in them, it is fitting to honor him as one would honor the high priest. Therefore, we do not fear that he will cause others to err, since he is learning what is suited to himself, and all the more it would be permitted to teach him if he were conducting his investigation to ascertain the purpose of the whole Torah, and thereby convert to Judaism completely. Maimonides, the Rambam, explores further in the Laws of Kings 10:9, where he writes, a non-Jew who learns Torah is deserving of death. He should only learn the 7 commandments applicable to him. In a responsum, however, he distinguishes between a non-Jew who accepts the holiness of the Torah and one who does not, ruling it permissible to teach the former but not the latter, because of the damage that it might arise. Since all non-Jews must be taught the Noahide laws, the decision of Maimonides not to teach a section of them must refer only to the rest of the Torah, as he himself writes. There is a question as to whether the statement of Rav Yochanan, which we said many times, a non-Jew who learns the Torah is deserving of death, has the force of law. Also, whether a Jew has a legal duty to hold himself back from teaching anything other than the Noahide laws. He answers, the Rambam, that without any doubt, this is the law, that where the Jewish people are in a position of strength, one should hold back from teaching the non-Jew until he converts. However, the non-Jew does not become liable to the death penalty if he does learn Torah, in contrast to the position concerning all other transgressions of the 7 laws, since the phrase used is deserving of death, not liable to death. Now, therefore, these laws may be taught to the Christians, since they acknowledge the divinity of the text of the Torah, but not at present to the Muslims, since they deny it, and any knowledge of its ideas would lead to error and become a stumbling block for the Jews dispersed among them. If Christians are taught, they are capable of accepting the ideas, and at any rate, their rejection of them would not cause further harm. Some commentators distinguish between the oral and written law, not because one is superior to other, because they have different methods of transmission. This is brought by the Maritz Chayot in Sota 35. Others forbid the 5 books of Moses, but permit the prophetic works and the writings. This is brought in the Magen Avram, chapter 334, paragraph 17. There is also an opinion that if one is asked a question on the 5 books of merely in passing, it should be answered for the sake of peace, as no ulterior motive is necessarily implied. Now, it should be understood that none of these disputes indicate a difference among the sages over how to relate Torah to the non-Jewish world. They are merely contentions over the aspect of teaching that is advisable at any given moment. The Jewish people, as custodians of the Torah, and in particular their leaders as successors to Moshe, have been entrusted with the task of bringing knowledge of these commandments to humanity. The spiritual hunger of man, and also the soul, will not be satisfied. What does this mean? This can be explained by a parable. A townsman was once married to the daughter of a king, but everything he brought her was as nothing to her. So too it is with the soul. Even if one were to bring it all the toys of the world, there would be nothing to it. Why? Because it comes from a higher realm. Man, who is created in the image of God, is searching for his spiritual roots. And the materialism that surrounds him cannot give him what his soul seeks, since because the soul derives from a higher spiritual realm, it desires spiritual nourishment. Therefore, the farther man distances himself from faith, the more he succumbs to despair. Now, Dr. Carl Jung, in his book Modern Man in Search of the Soul, writes that in the past 30 years, many men from all corners of the globe have come to seek my advice. I have treated sick people by the hundreds, many of them in the second half of their lives. There was not one whose problem was not due to a depressing religious outlook on life. It is possible to state with certainty that each one of them had sickened due to the giving up on that which religion provides to the believer, and they were only cured if they returned to recognizing religion. Our generation has enormous opportunities for enjoyment, yet it hungers for satisfaction more than any other. This is because it lacks the spiritual satisfaction that the soul desires. Faith in God is actually imprinted in man. In Psalms 113, we say, "From the rising of the sun until the setting, the name of God is praised." A famous rabbi, Eliyahu Lopian, poses a question concerning this verse. It was written in an era when the world was full of idols and only the Jewish people kept faith with God. How then could it be asserted that the name of God was praised from sunrise to sunset? His answer is that the soul is desirous for the Creator, as it is said, "My soul searches and thirsts for you." However, his paradoxical reaction to this thirst is to try to quench it with the worship of idols, but still he searches and finally he reaches complete faith, just as Abraham did. It is this continual search, sometimes on the unconscious level, that reveals the desire of the soul for God, concerning which the psalmists speak. And because of this, praised is the name of God, even though the world is filled with distractions. At this point, it is revealed the universal belief found throughout humanity in a higher power. This belief is traceable to the fact that the root of faith is the first man, Adam, the ancestor of every individual now living. To explain this, a child's existence is untenable without its parents, and even a child whose intelligence has not yet fully developed knows of the existence of his parents from the very fact of his own. Without education, so too Adam knew and recognized God as his creator. There was no need to command this belief, but he was commanded not to discard the knowledge, and thus also wore his descendants commanded that they should not worship idols. Moreover, Adam was a being formed by God's own hands. He perceived divinity at a very high level and maintained a link with God like that of Moses. From this origin, derives the belief of the nations of the world, including tribes long cut off from the outside world, in a supernatural order. This fact, that not one nation or tribe in the world lacks such belief, would not be possible if it had not been known to their forefathers from whom all humanity developed. We are not speaking here of those who willfully discard the heavenly yoke, but of the vast majority of humanity who live according to certain traditions. Despite the lack of contact between these people during thousands of years, there continued to exist the one common factor of belief in a supernatural power as a reality. No importance rests on the names by which each group refers to this power, and all researchers have been forced to agree that religion is not the special preserve of any particular culture. Man testifies in different ways that there is something in or outside the world that is greater than he and which is not bound to the confines of daily life that he himself is bound by. Generally, he feels that there is something behind the world that he can recognize, a force fundamentally different from his own being, which determines the fate of man. Rav Shlomo Wolbo explains this: a connection which links man to this higher force is rooted within him, clearly urging him to relate and draw nearer to the divine. Every man has the ability to pray and feels an inner desire to do so. For through prayer, one sees this connection to God with greater clarity. It is possible that a person sitting at their desk alone with their thoughts may feel no inclination for religion or God, but should their life be endangered or a loved one hover between life and death, then suddenly they find themselves able to pray deeply to the one who gives life and by whose hands every soul lives. And that brings us to the end of part 1. Part 2 will be coming shortly. If you are a Noahide or are looking to become a Noahide or want to know more about the 7 mitzvot, please leave a comment. I will try to read the comments as they come in. Let us know where you are in the world. Let us know why this interests you. Let us know what we can do. And I'll try to read the messages. Obviously, you can send me an email. It's the name of this channel. Thank you so much for watching from just outside Jerusalem. Shalom.